There were 45 tents scattered across my Florida land, bonfires crackling, beer coolers popping, and Karen, the HOA president with a spray tan and a god complex, was leading a sing-along like she owned the place. That was the exact moment I saw Ricky, my gator, slide out of the swamp and into the party. Screams, chaos. Someone dropped a ukulele. Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here. Let's rewind a bit. You ever live somewhere so humid that the air sticks to your skin like guilt at a church potluck? That's how Florida feels 90% of the year, but to me, it's heaven. My slice of it? A 10-acre chunk of inherited swamp tucked right between Highway 19 and the kind of gated community where the welcome signs have cursive fonts and the people have weaponized newsletters. My granddad called it Frog's Hollow, but the county just called it Parcel B 6721 and left it alone, same as everybody else did. That is, until Karen moved in. Karen was the kind of woman who treated her HOA position like it came with a badge and a sidearm. She'd show up at meetings in stilettos and power walk the cul-de-sacs like she was scouting enemy terrain. When she bought the McMansion across the drainage ditch from my place, complete with faux columns and a koi pond that had to be restocked every time a raccoon showed up, she made it her personal mission to beautify the neighborhood. And by neighborhood, she meant everything within binocular range of her back patio, including my swamp. At first it was subtle. I'd catch her squinting at my place from across the ditch, sipping rosé and shaking her head like she'd just seen me commit a fashion crime. Then came the letters. The first one was typed and laminated, slipped into a gallon-sized Ziploc bag like it was sacred scripture. Unmaintained vegetation, non-standard fencing, and visible animal structures in clear view of the HOA fence line. Please address these issues promptly. I laughed, crumpled it, and moved on. I wasn't part of the HOA. My property line was grandfathered in. Literally, my granddad had owned the land before the community even broke ground. The plat map showed a clear boundary, and legally, I wasn't under their jurisdiction. But Karen didn't let a little thing like legality get in the way of her crusade. Next, she filed a nuisance complaint with the county about my fencing. Claimed it was unstable and contributed to visual disarray. The county inspector came out, took one look at my hog wire and cedar posts, and asked if I'd built it myself. When I said yes, he complimented the craftsmanship and left. A week later, Karen showed up on my porch with a clipboard and the kind of smile that belongs on an IRS auditor. "Just a friendly check-in," she said. "A few of the neighbors have expressed concerns about, well, the general upkeep of your land and the reptiles." That's when I realized she'd done her homework. See, I'm not just a swamp squatter with a beard and a disdain for suburbia. I've got a degree in wildlife biology and work part-time with the state's nuisance alligator program. My property's home to 3 American alligators, all tagged and tracked under state permit. They live in a managed wetland area with fencing, signage, and more compliance paperwork than Karen's entire HOA handbook. "They're here legally," I told her, motioning to the state permit frame beside the front door. "And so am I." She didn't blink. Just sniffed the air like she smelled corruption. "It's still an eyesore," she said, "and frankly a liability. I've seen children riding bikes near your road. One wrong turn." She let the sentence hang like a threat. That night, she posted a picture of my land on the community message board with the caption, "Neighboring properties bringing down value? Let's talk solutions at next week's meeting." By then, she'd already filed for a zoning review, claiming my open habitat enclosures posed a danger to public safety. She called the local news station when that didn't stick. A camera crew showed up one afternoon while I was scrubbing algae from a turtle pond. "Mind if we film?" the anchor asked, as the camera panned across my wetlands. "Heard there's gators here." "Sure," I said. They're camera shy, but you're welcome to try. They caught 2 minutes of Ricky sunning on a log and turned it into a 5 o'clock segment titled, "Gators Next Door. Are Your Children at Risk?" After that, I started getting door knockers. People from the neighborhood wanting to understand what I was doing out here. Some were curious, some were afraid. One guy just wanted to know if I sold gator meat. Karen, meanwhile, doubled down. She hosted a community vote to petition the county to redraw the HOA boundaries to include my land. Brought in a shady land use attorney with teeth so white they looked fake. I got wind of it through a neighbor who secretly hated her but still went to meetings for the wine. "They think if they annex your land, they can bring it up to code," he said. Whatever that means. I sat on my porch that night, beer in hand, listening to the frogs croak and the gators grunt out in the reeds. I'd spent 5 years restoring this land, building nesting mounds, replanting native cypress, cleaning up the mess my granddad never had time to finish, and now some suburban dictator wanted to turn it into a lawn ornament. I wasn't just mad, I was insulted. I called my buddy at the Fish and Wildlife Commission and asked him to do a compliance walkthrough, just to have the latest paperwork in order. He came out, gave me the all clear, and even left a few new laminated signs. Authorized wetland habitat, do not enter. I posted one right by the fence line, angled toward Karen's patio. A week later, I found it spray painted with the words, "Swamp Trash." After that, it got personal. She sent a drone over my property and posted footage online, calling it evidence. I filed a trespass complaint. She responded by organizing a clean neighborhood rally with picket signs that said things like, "We deserve safety," and "Drain the swamp." The irony didn't escape me. What Karen didn't know was that every single time she escalated, I documented it. Every fake complaint, every misused permit request, every HOA budget expenditure that went toward community improvement projects that just happened to face my land. I wasn't just building a swamp. I was building a case. And Karen? She had no idea she was about to host a wilderness retreat on the exact stretch of ground where Ricky, my 9-foot gator, liked to sunbathe. But that part comes later. For now, just know this. In Florida, land doesn't forget, and neither do gators. It started with a piece of mail that looked too official to be real. The envelope was unmarked but sealed tight with one of those cheap gold stickers you get from office supply stores pretending to be state emblems. Inside, a courtesy warning from something called the Riverbend Environmental Assessment Subcommittee, citing me for inadequate visual containment of aquatic enclosures and threatening community impact reevaluation if left unaddressed. There was no return address, no phone number. Just a signature line with K. Mitchell, HOA President, Acting Liaison. I'd have laughed if I wasn't already sick of her games. Visual containment? That was HOA code speak for, "I can see your swamp from my brunch table." I knew it wasn't a real citation. Karen didn't have the jurisdiction, and Riverbend wasn't even a recognized municipality. It was a marketing name for her subdivision, made up by a real estate agent with a drone. I tossed it in the fire pit and made a note to call the county again, but it didn't stop there. That week, I got a total of 4 notices. One about unauthorized exterior lighting for the solar path lights I used along the walking trail. Another for unpermitted structures referring to the duck blind my nephew built over spring break. And one citing standing water as a vector for mosquito propagation, which was ironic coming from a neighborhood with decorative fountains that never got cleaned. Karen had weaponized bureaucracy. She'd even started forging city code citations with letterheads she found online, dropping them in my mailbox like they were subpoenas. But the real bomb dropped during a Tuesday HOA meeting I didn't attend because I was 4 hours south near Okeechobee, tagging baby gators and educating a bunch of middle schoolers about habitat loss. While I was knee-deep in conservation, Karen was busy introducing Motion 16, extension of community enrichment events to adjacent green spaces, which, surprise, surprise, included my property by name. She called it the Riverbend Wilderness Retreat Pilot Program, claiming it would foster a sense of adventure and togetherness for residents of all ages. The minutes, which a friendly neighbor anonymously emailed to me, made it clear this wasn't just a picnic. Karen had pitched a full weekend eco-immersion festival, complete with family camping, bonfires, a crafts with nature station, and an early morning gator watch hike. The part that really punched me in the gut? She cited my land as temporarily available due to low occupancy, like I was a seasonal hotel room. Never mind that I lived there full-time and had never once granted access. But she had a plan. She always did. The permit she used was an old, half-expired land use form from a local scout troop that had once camped near my east fence line with my written permission years ago. She'd refiled it under a community development clause and claimed to be revitalizing existing use patterns. The city, swamped with actual crimes and short-staffed from budget cuts, rubber-stamped it without even checking the boundaries. I found out too late, pulled into my driveway 3 days later with mud on my boots and a cooler full of hatchling trackers, only to see a row of SUVs, station wagons, and one shiny Airstream trailer parked haphazardly across my field like a Costco version of Burning Man. There were tents, 45 of them by my last count, giant REI monstrosities, pup tents for the kids, one inflatable dome labeled Meditation Zone. My solar lights had been unplugged and shoved into a bin labeled Tripping Hazard. Someone had dug a shallow latrine behind the palmettos. A group of teens were setting off bottle rockets near the pond, and Karen, decked out in a designer cargo vest and a wide-brim hat she probably got on clearance at REI, was standing on a makeshift wooden stage with a megaphone and a damn ukulele. I froze, partly because I was so stunned I thought I was hallucinating, partly because I saw Ricky, my 9-foot gator, watching from the edge of the water like he was trying to figure out if the ukulele player came with a side of fries. I slammed the truck door and marched toward the crowd, boots stomping through discarded trail mix packets and juice box straw wrappers. Some kid asked me if I was the ranger. "No," I said. "I'm the owner." Karen spotted me and immediately stepped down from her stage like she'd just seen a health inspector during a rat-themed buffet. "Oh, hello," she called cheerfully, as if we were old friends and not mortal enemies. "You're back early. What the hell is this?" I asked, gesturing to the sprawling sea of tents, lawn chairs, and discarded Target receipts. "This," she said with the voice of someone who just got caught hosting a surprise party in your living room, "is community in action. We wanted to reconnect with nature, and your land is just so underutilized." "Underutilized?" I repeated, jaw clenched so tight I thought I might bite through molars. "You're trespassing. All of you." She blinked, feigning innocence. "Oh, come now, don't be dramatic. We have a provisional event permit. It was all approved, and besides, you weren't even here." I pointed to the fence line, where my "No Trespassing, Private Property, Gator Habitat" signs had been ripped down and replaced with poster board that read, "Riverbend Wilderness Entry. Welcome, campers." "You cut my fence," I said, my voice low. "You tore down my signs. You cleared a fire pit in a federally protected habitat, and you're telling me this was just a friendly get-together?" Karen sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You're so territorial. This could be such a beautiful partnership if you just loosen up. People are bonding out here. We made trail mix. There was a s'mores workshop. A toddler waddled by in a muddy diaper holding a baby frog in each hand. Nearby, someone was blaring acoustic covers of 80s hits from a Bluetooth speaker duct taped to a tree. One of the teens yelled, "Cannonball!" and sprinted toward the gator pond. I barely caught him before he reached the water, gripping the back of his hoodie and hauling him backward while shouting, "That's not a pool, genius!" The kid's mom ran up and scolded me for grabbing her son, right before she asked where the actual alligators were because it would be such a cute picture. My blood boiled. I turned back to Karen. "You need to clear this out now." She crossed her arms, megaphone dangling from her wrist like a fashion accessory. "You're making a scene. You really want to be known as the man who shut down family fun? Besides, I already spoke with code enforcement, and they were fine with it." I knew then that she wasn't just clueless. She was strategic, manipulative, dangerous. She hadn't stumbled into my land by accident. This was a full-scale occupation wrapped in a community potluck, and worst of all, she'd done it while I was gone. While I was doing actual conservation work, my home had become a campground, a liability nightmare, and a target for her next HOA conquest. But I wasn't done. Not even close. If Karen wanted a wilderness experience, she was about to get one, because the next time Ricky slid out of that water and into the mix, there wouldn't be any warning. And I wasn't going to lift a damn finger to stop him. I didn't scream. I didn't flip a table or swing a machete, though God knows the thought crossed my mind when I stepped over my split fence line and saw some guy grilling bratwurst 10 feet from Ricky's favorite mud wallow. No, I played it smart. Smart is what gets things done in Florida. Smart and documentation. So that night, after politely asking a toddler not to feed a marshmallow to a cottonmouth snake, I wish I were joking, I went inside, poured myself a tall glass of sweet tea with a dash of spite, and opened 3 browser tabs. One for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, one for the County Code Enforcement Portal, and one for a local reporter named Tara Granger, whose past expose on HOA fraud had earned her an award and at least 2 restraining orders. My first call was to Fish and Wildlife. I knew who to talk to, Marcus, a field officer who'd once pulled me out of waist-deep muck after I got stuck tagging hatchlings in hurricane runoff. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "You're calling after dark. That can't be good," he said. "It's not. I've got an illegal camping event happening on top of my conservation pond. 45 people, bonfires, kids throwing rocks at snapping turtles. They're on your land?" "Yes." "With gators present?" "Ricky, at least. Possibly 2 more." There was a pause. "Text me the coordinates. We'll get a unit there." Next, I filed a complaint with code enforcement, attaching a full photo gallery, cut fences, a trampled sign, unauthorized structures, waste mismanagement, and what looked like someone's attempt to dig a trench-style toilet with a beach shovel. Then, I emailed Tara. Subject line: "Oh, Karen hosts unlicensed campout in protected wetland, bribes marshmallow gods." Her response was immediate. "On my way. Got my camera. Do not move the body unless it's still breathing." Classic Tara. She'd grown up around here. Knew the difference between a backyard barbecue and a full-blown disaster in hiking boots. Meanwhile, I dug through my deed files for the big one, the document most people forget exists until they need it. The conservation easement. My granddad had filed it through a federal wetlands restoration initiative back in '93. It allowed us to maintain the land for wildlife purposes and limited outside development. It also came with a sweet tax break, and more importantly, criminal penalties for anyone who disturbed it without authorization, especially if they invited a crowd. Especially if those people lit fires, harassed wildlife, and knocked over 2 cypress saplings that had taken me 6 years to cultivate. The clause was crystal clear. No unauthorized human occupation, recreational or otherwise, shall be permitted within the easement boundaries without the written consent of the landowner and FWC. I made copies, highlighted everything. Then I loaded up a USB stick and labeled it Karen's Last Supper. I spent the next few hours watching the chaos from my front porch, quiet as a panther in a hammock. The campers had started singing again, off-key renditions of Kumbaya and some kind of nature-themed parody of Taylor Swift. Karen was in rare form, strutting around the fire pit in a branded vest with Wilderness Director stitched in cursive across the back. She was giving interviews to parents like she was leading a TED Talk. That's when Tara showed up, pulling her battered van onto the shoulder and stepping out with a shoulder-mounted camera, a clipboard, and the expression of a woman seconds away from her next career-defining headline. "You weren't kidding," she muttered, eyeing the setup. "This is a lawsuit in cargo shorts." "Watch this," I said. I pointed down toward the East Marsh, where a long, dark shape had just broken the surface. Ricky, my boy. He was moving slow, smooth, casual. He'd heard the noise and come to investigate. I didn't bait him, wouldn't need to. He was wild and curious, and loved campfire heat like a reptilian moth to flame. Ricky eased up the embankment like a ghost in camo, pausing near a stack of discarded s'mores wrappers. His tail dragged a trail behind him. The music stopped. One kid screamed. Then, a dad screamed louder. Chairs flew. Marshmallows flew. A woman shrieked something about a dinosaur. Ricky didn't charge. He just stood there. All 9 feet of prehistoric muscle and apathy, blinking in the firelight like, what the hell is this party and why wasn't I invited sooner? Karen, to her credit, didn't scream. Instead, she tried to take control. Everybody stay calm. This is a teachable moment. That's just a large amphibian. Someone yelled, "Lady, that's a gator." Well, yes, but it's probably fine. Someone just grab a broom. And that's when the cops showed up. Sirens, lights, the works. Right behind them was Marcus and his fish and wildlife crew, all in official uniforms and not at all amused. One officer nearly tripped over a deflated air mattress trying to clear people away. Another was already shouting orders about animal control procedures. Ricky, wise creature that he is, took the opportunity to saunter back toward the water, slow and unbothered, before disappearing beneath the surface with a flick of his tail and the softest splash. Marcus approached me first. "You weren't exaggerating." "Nope. How many are on the property?" 45, give or take. 2 porta potties, 1 ukulele. "Any sign of Karen Mitchell?" "Check the one with the clipboard and a panic twitch." As the scene unraveled, Tara filmed everything, parents arguing. HOA volunteers trying to pretend they hadn't cut a fence to enter federal land. Karen being led aside by 2 FWC officers holding a thick stack of printed violations. One officer read the easement clause aloud while Karen tried to protest. "I was enhancing community morale," she insisted. "You trespassed on protected habitat," the officer replied. "You disrupted wildlife. You lit fires within a conservation zone. You invited minors onto land you do not own, and you removed posted signage under federal authority. This is not morale. This is a crime." Karen looked like she'd swallowed a frog whole. "But we had a permit." "Signed by who?" "Myself, and HOA board approval." "Karen, that's not how federal land use works." I watched it all from the side, arms crossed, trying very hard not to smile. That's when a second officer approached me, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Lambert?" "That's me. We've got everything we need from you. Your documentation lines up. You'll want to keep a copy of this report for your records. It'll be forwarded to the county and the EPA." "EPA?" I asked. "Wetlands clause. You're in the buffer zone for the regional aquifer system. If they'd lit one more fire pit, it would have triggered a groundwater contamination review. Karen overheard that and nearly fainted. They let her off the property while Tara zoomed in on her face like it was Oscar season. By midnight, the tents were down, the coolers were packed, and the bonfire was a smoldering pile of marshmallow char and broken suburban dreams. The police issued citations. Fish and Wildlife filed formal charges, and by sunrise, Karen's name was on every HOA Facebook group from Tampa to Tallahassee. The headline on Tara's piece ran the next day: Gator Preserve invaded by HOA Wilderness Experience, chaos, arrests, and a surprise reptile cameo. She even credited Ricky by name. He's a bit of a local celebrity now. As for me, I spent the next few weeks reviewing the settlement offers and building a new set of steel signs for the property line. They read, "No trespassing," "No camping," "No careening," underneath in smaller font. "This is a federally protected alligator habitat. Violators may be filmed and fed to local media." The land was quiet again. Ricky was happy. I was sipping tea on the porch when a realtor's car pulled up to Karen's house with a "For Sale" sign already strapped to the roof rack. Poetic, I thought. Almost too easy. But Florida justice doesn't always need a judge. Sometimes all it needs is a swamp, a gator, and one HOA queen who didn't read the fine print. There's a certain hush that falls over a Florida neighborhood after a public disaster, something like the quiet after a hurricane, or the stillness that follows a gator's splash. In the days that came after Karen's campout catastrophe, Riverbend was silent except for the whir of lawnmowers and the occasional nervous yapping of suburban dogs. Nobody looked at me when I drove into town, and the parents who used to clutch their children and cross the street now gave me a wide berth, not out of fear, but respect. The legend of the Great Gator Invasion, as folks started calling it, traveled faster than a summer thunderstorm. It didn't take long for the fallout to hit. By Monday morning, the HOA's Facebook group was on fire, comments piling up like fire ants on a dropped orange. Screenshots from Tara's expose spread like digital kudzu. There was Karen, red-faced and stammering as Fish and Wildlife handed her a stack of citations. There were angry parents complaining about traumatized kids and ruined camping gear. There were receipts from the cleanup bill, which now included wetland restoration fees, county fines, EPA investigations, and a federal review that made everyone in a 10-mile radius sweat. But the best part, the part that made me sit back with my sweet tea and savor every syllable, was when the dollar amounts started circulating. 17,800 in immediate fines, plus a projected 112, zero in restoration costs, legal expenses, and liability waivers for every resident who'd set foot on my land. The HOA's rainy day fund, which Karen once bragged about during every board meeting, vanished overnight, siphoned by government agencies and cleanup crews like the world's most satisfying bank heist. Suddenly, the neighborhood that prided itself on perfect lawns and matching mailboxes had brown grass and pink foreclosure notices instead of yard flamingos. The next HOA meeting wasn't held in the community clubhouse. It happened in the parking lot, under the glare of security lights, and it looked more like a witch trial than a board session. Karen stood at the center, surrounded by neighbors waving violation notices and printouts from the local news. A shaky-voiced treasurer read out the numbers, and someone's grandma, who'd never spoken at a meeting before, stood up and asked the question that finished Karen for good. "Why should we pay for your mistakes?" She didn't have an answer. The board dissolved that night. The secretary quit on the spot, sobbing about lost weekends and the price of HOA insurance. The treasurer started selling Mary Kay full-time. Even Karen's best friend, Barbara, with the dachshund, voted against her, citing irreparable trust issues and the emotional trauma of losing my favorite hiking socks in the marsh. As for Karen, she tried to hold on, claimed she'd been misled by faulty permits, blamed rogue campers, and even accused me of sabotage by wildlife. But the damage was done. The county issued a formal order stripping the HOA of its authority until a full audit could be completed. The board's only remaining power was to set the date for its own final meeting. No one attended. The expose hit the evening news, Tara Granger's face beaming as she outlined the lessons of responsible land stewardship, the dangers of overzealous neighborhood governance, and, for good measure, included a slow-motion replay of Ricky emerging from the swamp with a s'more stuck to his snout. Suddenly, Riverbend wasn't famous for its gated community or its manicured lawns. It was famous for being the first HOA in county history to go bankrupt from violating a gator habitat. I watched it all unfold from my porch, sometimes with a glass of bourbon, sometimes with nothing but the company of bullfrogs and the steady rumble of summer storms. I spent a few days collecting the remains of the wilderness retreat, bags of trash, abandoned tents, and one sad, waterlogged ukulele that I hung as a trophy from the live oak by my drive. But I didn't just rebuild the fence, I fortified it. With the settlement money from the HOA's insurance, and a generous state wetlands restoration grant, thank you, federal paperwork, I erected a line of steel-posted, camera-monitored boundary markers. Each one had a big, bold sign. Wildlife surveillance, federal habitat, trespassers may be educated or eaten. I got creative. Along the southern path, I installed a small solar-powered kiosk with a touchscreen, explaining the conservation project, the history of the land, and, my favorite part, a rotating slideshow of Ricky in all his prehistoric glory, sunbathing or grinning for the camera. Local schools started booking tours. The county wildlife office helped me design a field trip program. Grandparents brought their grandkids and asked if Ricky was the famous gator from TV. Even the mayor's office sent a congratulatory letter, congratulating me on turning a conflict into a community asset. The neighborhood, for its part, changed. The for sale signs multiplied faster than palmetto bugs in August. The house at the end of the cul-de-sac, once Karen's pride and joy, sat empty for months, price dropping every time a Google search brought up HOA alligator fiasco. Eventually, a nice couple from up north bought it for half its original value. When I saw Karen one last time, she was loading the last of her monogrammed luggage into the trunk of a dusty Lexus, face drawn and shoulders hunched like she'd aged a decade in a week. She didn't look at me, didn't wave, just sped off toward the interstate, one more HOA refugee fleeing the Sunshine State with her dreams packed beside her ruined reputation. Word is she's now running an Airbnb consulting business in Ohio. Some people never learn. The final tally? The HOA was dissolved, the board scattered, and Riverbend returned to what it should have been, a patchwork of families, retirees, and wild spaces, stitched together by a respect for the swamp and the things that live there. Ricky, for his part, seemed to enjoy the extra attention, basking on his favorite log while school kids pointed and giggled. And local news crews rolled tape for every new season of Florida's wildest homeowners. Some evenings, as the sun dropped behind the cypress trees and the frogs kicked up their nightly chorus, I'd catch my reflection in the window, grinning, peaceful, and just a little bit smug. I'd made my stand, protected my land, and brought down the HOA that thought it could conquer the swamp. The air was thick, but so was the satisfaction. I sipped my tea, watched the lightning bugs flicker over the reeds, and listened to Ricky grunt his approval from the water's edge. And on the fence, gleaming in the moonlight, hung the new sign that said it all. Private property. Trespassers may be educated or eaten. Some lessons you only learn the hard way. Others you only need to learn once. In Florida, we like to make sure the message sticks.